Chapter 491. This demon was 30 feet tall and barefooted. Black fur grew under his black chainmail. He had a demonic face and blood-red pupils. A pair of sharp horns grew out of his lush black hair. In his right hand, he held a huge saber that was 15 feet long and carried it on his shoulder. Facing all the immortals and gods in the hall, he put down the huge blade and smashed the ground. He laughed arrogantly. Today no one should even think about saving giant god Huang Hao because all of you will die here. The immortals were terrified. They took out their Dharma treasures and prepared to fight. This demon dared to barge into this place without anyone noticing, so its strength was not to be underestimated. Seventh on the great Emperor's steel, Yao Shilong. Old Star Lord said with a solemn expression. The master of all gods narrowed his eyes. When the immortals heard that, they were in chaos. The top 10 existences on the great Emperor's steel were all undying old monsters with ridiculously powerful strength. None of them were weaker than giant god Huang Hao. Yao Shilong was a great sage of the demon race in the Kiliacosm. He was transformed from an ancient cow. When he was young, his clansmen were all eaten up by dragons. He was lucky enough to escape, and from then on he changed his name to Yao Shilong. All the dragons he encountered were eaten alive by him. In the entire vast thousand worlds, no one could compare to him in terms of eating the most dragons. Zhou Xuanji had also heard of him from the old beggar. The old beggar had wanted to take Yao Shilong as his disciple, but Yao Shilong had looked down on him. Yao Shilong was one of the few who had successfully rejected him. For example, Zhou Xuanji did not successfully reject it. Every time he mentioned Yao Shilong, the old beggar would sigh in regret. As such, Yao Shilong's name left a deep impression on Zhou Xuanji. He carefully sized up Yao Shilong. The demonic chi was indeed ridiculously strong. Boom. The gate of the divine palace suddenly closed. Yao Shilong grinned and said, "Are you ready? I'm going to eat you all." This sentence completely ignited the immortal's anger. This demon was completely looking down on the divine palace. Courting death. How dare you barge into the land of immortals and gods? You must be tired of living. His Majesty is here, how dare you be so noisy? Too arrogant. The immortals cursed, but no one dared to make the first move. This scene made Zhou Xuanji speechless. The divine palace still lacked cohesion, especially between the immortal gods of the ancient immortal tribe and the immortal gods of the heavenly law. They were like two different factions that had never merged. The Laughing Sky Patriarch and a group of first-grade immortal gods stepped forward and walked toward Yao Shilong. They emitted their own powerful auras, causing the palace to tremble slightly. Chapter 492. Seeing that the enemy was charging at him, Zhou Xuanji did not have the time to speak and directly activated the power of the two ancient gazing legendary swords. A woo, roar, billions of wolf howls suddenly sounded, shaking the heavens and the earth. Two powerful flames engulfed Zhou Xuanji's body. One was the black flame, while the other was the green netherworld flame. Without a word, Zhou Xuanji slashed with all his might. In an instant he felt all the heavenly law immortal energy in his body being sucked away. Bang! The two waves of sword chi were like two tornadoes that twisted around each other as they charged forward. Their diameters reached tens of thousands of feet, and their momentum was so great that it seemed as if the heavens were collapsing. The red-haired man's eyes widened. Because the distance between the two of them was very close, he had no time to dodge and was drowned by the sword chi. He didn't even have the time to scream. The Qianxia map supplied Zhou Xuanji with an endless supply of heavenly law celestial power. He immediately flew up in case more enemies came after him. He advanced at full speed, his expression extremely ugly. This entire time, he had thought that the great Emperor Dao Court was an underground faction that only existed in the shadows and did not have many members. Because of their identities, they did not dare to show themselves. He had never thought that the great Emperor Dao Court would continuously invade the Center God province. It was as if they had gone mad. Soon he flew above the 15th level of heaven. Along the way he saw many floating islands and palaces. He even saw someone planting flowers and plants in the courtyard. Those people were all mighty figures. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to establish a clan in such a high place. Meanwhile, wherever he waved his sword, the sword chi dissipated, revealing the red-haired man's figure. At this moment, the red-haired man was incomparably miserable. His body was covered in blood and his bones could be seen everywhere. Half of his hair had been burnt off. He looked up furiously and gnashed his teeth. "Zhou Xuanji, I will tear you into pieces." After that, he turned into a sharp sword and flew away quickly. The two sides began to chase each other. Zhou Xuanji continuously used 10,000 ultimate steps and continuously moved about. The heavily injured red-haired man was still chasing after him, and the distance between them was still decreasing. The 20th heaven. Boom. Zhou Xuanji forced his way through the heavenly lightning. The thunderclap sword above Zhou Xuanji's head absorbed the heavenly lightning and opened a path for him. The red-haired man was not so lucky. He was struck by the heavenly lightning one after another. The blood on his body seemed to flow endlessly. 21st layer of heaven. 22nd level heaven. 23rd heaven. 24 levels of heaven. The saber chi broke the ground and swept toward Zhou Xuanji with an unstoppable momentum. Zhou Xuanji's black hair danced wildly. The 9 sword souls behind his back shot out and dispersed the saber chi forcefully before crashing into Yao Shilong. Yao Shilong underestimated Zhou Xuanji and was sent flying backward while vomiting blood. Zhou Xuanji followed up with a cold voice, "You worms from the great Emperor Dao court, don't even think about living. I can't defeat you at the same cultivation stage?" Tinsha Map. World Buddha Art. Heavenly Law Great Emperor. Heavenly Law Immortal Constitution. Sword Soul. Violet Demon Monarch Heart. Over 300 legendary swords. With so many great serendipity on him, what did he have to fear? Zhou Xuanji dashed toward Yao Shilong while sticking close to the ground. Yao Shilong steadied himself. Seeing Zhou Xuanji charging at him, he roared. Demonic chi emanated from his body, and his physique expanded a few times. He swung his saber wildly at Zhou Xuanji, and the saber chi rained down like a violent storm. Zhou Xuanji did not dodge at all. He activated the dual sword mode with his sword will, and his speed was no slower than Yao Shilong's. Clang, clang, ding, ding, clang, the saber and sword clashed. Both of their auras reached their pinnacle, and the horrifying pressure crumbled the ground. Far away, the other 5 powerful cultivators from the great Emperor Dao court gathered. When they witnessed the battle, they were all dumbfounded. How can it be? Is Zhou Xuanji so powerful? This brat's power is comparable to universe heaven. But his opponent is Yao Shilong. Should we attack together? Let's go. Prison suppressing Vajra, the red-haired man, and the other 3 powerful cultivators quickly reached an agreement and charged at Zhou Xuanji together. If all 6 of them were defeated by Zhou Xuanji, it would be a real joke. Zhou Xuanji ignored the other 5 and stared fixedly at Yao Shilong, suppressing him. Over 300 legendary swords pierced toward Yao Shilong wildly, and Yao Shilong was at a disadvantage. Damn. Why is it like this? Yao Shilong roared in his heart. His blood-red eyes glowed with a blood-red radiance. Chapter 499. Zhou Xuanji had already entered a state of enlightenment. He was alone in a vast world. There was no one around him, no preaching site and no golden pagoda. Above him was the boundless blue sky, and below him was the undulating endless sea of clouds. He was practicing with his sword. He wielded the crimson dragon sword and practiced the white crane sword technique. It was just like the first time he practiced the sword. He calmly practiced his swordsmanship. There was no majestic sword chi, only simple sword moves. After a while, he split into 2 clones and continued to practice the sword. The world was vast, and he was practicing his swordsmanship above the clouds. His consciousness had no goal. It was like an ant moving leaves, never knowing exhaustion. It was like an eagle that would forever hover in the sky. It was also like a drop of water that fell into a river. It was unknown where it would flow, and there was no trace to be found. More and more doppelgangers appeared, all of them practicing the white crane sword technique. 500. 5,000. 50,000. 500,000. After an unknown period of time. Above the sea of clouds and below the sky, Zhou Xuanji's silhouettes were everywhere. At this moment, his consciousness gradually awakened. Everything has a Tao. Humans have a Tao, demons have a Tao, and demons have a Tao. The Tao can be small, but it can also be big. All the Taos in the world converge into the great Tao. Sage Daojing's voice suddenly sounded out, and Zhou Xuanji began thinking about his own Tao. He had learned many sword techniques and mastered many divine abilities. Previously, he had pursued the 10,000 swords to form a sword Tao world. As time passed, this would not be his ultimate goal. 10,000 years was long and 10,000 swords were easy to reach. Then what was his true Tao? Sword Tao. All of Zhou Xuanji's began attacking each other. They were no longer using the white crane sword technique but all sorts of sword techniques. Trisource vein severing sword, vibrant raindrop sword, soul eater demon slash, stellar sun, ancestral dragon sword, sky-dominating divine sword, 36 paths jade shao sword, primordial chaos sword shadow, emperor's way thousand-hand sword Buddha, and so on. A great battle of the way of the sword that belonged to Zhou Xuanji unfolded. In the outside world, waves began to rise around Zhou Xuanji. From afar, it looked like a tornado had wrapped around him. It was a spectacular sight. The people around him were all in a meditative state and were not affected by him. Sage Daojing nodded in satisfaction. As expected of the prodigy he valued the most. At this moment he suddenly looked up. 3 meteors with blazing tails streaked across the sky and fell into the sea of clouds. "He's here," Sage Daojing muttered, his face filled with worry. Miraculously, his voice never stopped, as if there were 2 of him talking. 10 years later. Zhou Xuanji finally broke through to Universe Heaven Level 1. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached the Universe Heaven realm. Gacha begins. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner has obtained Celestial Shaking Zhu Yuan Luo Sword, Ancient Gazing, Divine Wind Sword, and World Suppression. With the Heavenly Saint here, he didn't even need to go through a tribulation. His consciousness was always in a state of comprehension. He didn't even hear the sword spirit's voice. His heavenly Tao immortal energy surged, suppressing the entire dojo. Most creatures were startled. They opened their eyes and saw Zhou Xuanji's majestic spirit chi ripples, which were like a volcanic eruption. Jiang Shui, Huang Lianxin, Xiao Jinghong, and the others also opened their eyes and looked at Zhou Xuanji with admiration. Zhou Xuanji was always walking in front. Just his aura alone made them feel like they could not catch up. He did not open his eyes. After a brief moment of shock, the others continued to close their eyes and cultivate. Above the sea of clouds, giant god Huang Hao stood proudly. Before him was the setting sun. It was so dazzling and majestic. Old Star Lord appeared beside giant god Huang Hao and said, "Those 3 auras just now, did you sense them?" Giant god Huang Hao nodded and said with a solemn expression, "There's a powerful force that concealed their auras, and it's impossible to trace them. They seem to have descended from the 33rd heaven." The 33rd heaven was still Thought Temple. But the 33rd heaven was not the highest heaven. Legends said that one could face the heavenly law directly after reaching the 36th heaven. This might be related to the heavenly saint. Don't you think it's strange that he opened a dojo? Old Star Lord said with a frown, which made giant god Huang Hao fall into deep thought. In the recent hundreds of years, too many things had happened in the Center God province. The great Emperor Dao Court, which used to hide in the dark, began to surface and rampage in the world. "No matter what, I will protect the Center God province," giant god Huang Hao said calmly with determination. He was not only the God Palace's war god but also the Center God province's war god. If not for the God Palace's transfer back to the northern wilderness region, he would not have returned to the God Palace to serve the Master of Gods. "It's better to be careful." Old Star Lord sighed. After that, he flicked his sleeves and left. When Zhou Xuanji was 234 years old, he regained consciousness. He opened his eyes and realized that he was not in the Golden Tower but in Still Thought Temple. Sage Daojing sat in front of him. 2 people stood beside him. One was Marquis and the other was an unfamiliar face. "You are finally awake," Sage Daojing said with a kind smile. Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown, "Is the lecture over?" Marquis snorted, "No. The dojo is still here. Sage has a mission for us to do." Chapter 511. After the 9 divine moons fused into his body, Zhou Xuanji fell into a mysterious state. All this while, he felt that the 9-moon execution sword contained boundless power. No matter how he activated it, he could not bring out the full power of this legendary sword. Just now, he activated the power of the divine moons with the battle path flame soul and broke through the barrier instantly. The power of the divine moons flowed into his body with unstoppable force. His consciousness fell into a state of dizziness. When everything returned to normal, he found himself in a vast starry sky. Countless stars floated in front of him. All of them were like moons, glowing faintly. Divine moons. Compared to the other stars, these divine moons were extremely eye-catching. They were radiating a divine radiance, like the stars surrounding the moon, holy and noble. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes wide. There were so many divine moons in the universe? The Supreme Legendary Sword System absorbed 9 mystic moons and created the 9-moon execution sword? At this moment he saw a rainbow coming from the depths of the universe. It destroyed the divine moons directly, and the continuous explosions plunged the vast universe into daylight. Zhou Xuanji woke up suddenly and realized that he was levitating high up in the sky. Strands of green flames flickered in the white radiance, and the 9-moon execution sword in his hand seemed to have grown longer. Hundreds of universe heaven cultivators looked up at him with different expressions. Some were anxious, some were furious, some were fearful, and some were jealous. An unprecedented power boiled in Zhou Xuanji's body. He looked around him and realized that all the legendary swords levitated around him, glowing with the same white radiance. It was just like the group of divine moons he saw before, standing proudly under the sky. In the royal capital, countless people looked at him in disbelief. Feng Yuxia was also shocked. The divine moon in the sky, all spells are silent. She mumbled to herself. Emperor Tsang, who had been eyeing Zhou Xuanji, could no longer sit still. With a loud cry he charged at Zhou Xuanji with his spear. In the blink of an eye he traveled 10,000 meters and came up to Zhou Xuanji. With the spear in his right hand he twisted his wrist and stabbed at Zhou Xuanji. Boom! A white radiance appeared and forcefully blocked the tip of his spear. Emperor Tsang was shocked, but he was a universe heaven level 12 cultivator after all. He used brute force to push Zhou Xuanji toward the horizon. Zhou Xuanji, however, had a strange expression. Under the white radiance of the divine moons, he felt that Emperor Tsang was not invincible. He stopped abruptly, and Emperor Azure was unable to advance any further. Sword Spirit, is the disaster-releasing divine sword really that powerful? Zhou Xuanji asked in his heart.